After reading the history of craft, I have been thinking about questions. What exactly is craft? What is art? And is craft art? When we mention about art, what do you think of? Very detailed oil paintings such as Mona Lisa, or still very famous sculptures such as David? But what about vases, porcelain, or those musical instruments? These things take a long time to make, but are they art? When we talk about art, we think of artists. It seems obviously to view people such as Da Vinci as legendary artists. Of course, he got great talent, but they also happened to live in the right place at the right time. Because before their lifetime, the concept of artist is hardly to exist. In the history, the master, following the really strict rules to work their way up to the ranks over many years of practice and well-defined stage of accomplishments, passing established traditions to next generation. Pinterest regards these markers, collecting rather than individually and their work from Merano glass globes to Fanny's lace, were valued as symbols of social status, not only for their beauty, but their adherence to a particular particular tradition, and the customer, who paid for the work, was more likely to get credit. It wasn't until around 1400s people began to draw a line between art and craft. In Florence, Italy, a new cultural ideal was what would later be called Renaissance humanism was beginning to take form. Florentine intelligence began to spread the idea of reformulating classical Greek and Roman work, while placing greater value on individual creativity than collecting production. Within a single generation, people's attitude about objects and their markers would shift dramatically, such as in 1550, Giorgio Vasari published a book called Lives of Most Excellent Painters, Sculptors, and Architects, elevating this type of creators to rockstar status by sharing juicy details. In the mind of publics, painting, sculpture, and architecture were now considered arts, and their markers creative masterminds, artists. Meanwhile, those who maintained good tradition and faithfully practiced would be known community as artisans, and they were considered minor or decorative arts, connoting an inferior status and solidifying the distinction between art and craft that still persists in the Western world. So, if we consider a painting art, then where does the leaf an African mask, a Chinese porcelain vase, a Norwegian rug? It turns out that in the history of art, the value placed on innovation is the exception rather than the rule. In many cultures of the world, the distinction between art and craft has never existed. When art historical historians of the 19th century saw that the arts of some non-Western cultures did not change for thousand years. They classified the word as primitive, suggesting that their makers were incapable of innovating, and therefore they are not really artists. What, what they did not realize was that the makers were not seeking to innovate at all. The value of their work lay precisely in preserving visual traditions rather than changing. In the last few decades, work such as quiz, ceramics, and wood carving has become more included in the art history book and displayed in the art museum alongside painting and sculpture. So maybe it's time to dispense with word terms like art and craft in favor of the word like visual art.